Hey everyone, hope you're doing great. Welcome back to my channel. In today's video, we'll dive into what if Deku created a new order of villains. Smash that subscribe button, and be sure to peek at the description below. Let's begin. The air in the Muzidifa Celestial District was crisp and clean, filtered by the advanced atmospheric scrubbers that served the city's most affluent commercial zone. Below, the streets were a pristine river of humanity, flowing between canyons of polished chrome and shimmering solar-tinted glass. Izuku Midoriya, clad in the sleek, dark green and black of his latest hero costume, stood on the precipice of Celestial Tower A, the wind tugging gently at his cowl. 6 months into his advanced field internship, the novelty had been replaced by a quiet, thrumming sense of responsibility. He was under the wing of the pro-hero Crusader, number 9 on the hero billboard chart. Crusader was the epitome of the modern hero, efficient, media-savvy, and unflappable. His quirk, Kinetic Bastion, allowed him to absorb and redirect kinetic energy, making him an unparalleled defensive wall. He didn't have the raw, city-leveling power of an Endeavor or the iconic charisma of All Might, but he was unshakably reliable. A pillar of the system. Log the patrol route, Deku! Crusader's voice crackled in his earpiece, devoid of warmth but sharp with professionalism. He stood a few feet away, his own silver and white costume practically glowing in the afternoon sun. He wasn't looking at the city, but at a datapad in his gauntlet. Cross-reference with the HPSC's designated potential threat zones for this sector. Note any deviations, no matter how minor. Yes, sir, Izuku replied, his own eyes scanning the crowd below. His gaze wasn't just looking, it was dissecting. He saw a child trip and get caught by their father, a courier bot swerving to avoid a stray dog, a flicker of light from a window that could be a camera flash or a sniper's scope. His mind, a relentless engine of analysis, catalogued it all. It was second nature, the same obsessive habit that had filled 13 notebooks, now honed by one for all's heightened senses. You're still looking for villains in every shadow, kid, Crusader commented, not unkindly. He finally looked up from his datapad. 99% of hero work isn't fighting. It's presence. Deterrence. Paperwork. Remember the primary directive of liability mitigation. Izuku nodded, the phrase as familiar as his own name by now. It was Crusader's mantra. Every action was weighed against its potential legal, financial, and public relations fallout. To Crusader, a successful operation was one that generated the least amount of paperwork and no negative media cycles. It was a philosophy that felt cold, clinical. It was a stark contrast to All Might's simple, booming ethos, save everyone. I understand, sir, Izuku said. But shouldn't the priority always be potential for harm to civilians? Mitigating that seems more important than mitigating liability. Crusader gave a short, humorless chuckle. In a perfect world, yes. In this one, a hero who causes 10 billion yen in property damage to save one person from a purse snatcher is a menace, not a hero. The system has rules. We operate within them. It's what separates us from the chaos. Now, finish the log. We have a meet and greet with the Minister of Hero Affairs in the Tower B Sky Lounge in an hour. Izuku suppressed a sigh and turned his attention back to the city. He loved being a hero, loved the feeling of one for all singing in his veins, a sacred trust he was determined to honor. But this side of it, the politics, the bureaucracy, the cold calculus of acceptable losses, left a hollow ache in his chest. He pushed it down. All Might had navigated this world. He would too. He was just about to key in the final patrol log when a flicker caught his eye. Not a glint of light, but a distortion. A heat haze low on the street level, near the base of Celestial Tower B. It was barely perceptible. He zoomed in with his visor's optical enhancement. He saw it again, near another support column for the overhead monorail track. Then a third, at the entrance to the massive underground parking structure that connected the 3 celestial towers. His blood ran cold. That wasn't a natural phenomenon. It was a quirk. A subtle, dangerous one. Sir? Izuku said, his voice tight. I'm seeing multiple energy signatures at the base of the celestial complex. They look like vibrational resonators. Low frequency. Crusader's head snapped up, his professional apathy vanishing in an instant. Specify. 3 points of contact I can see. Tower B's primary foundation, the monorail support, and the parking garage entrance. The pattern is deliberate. They're targeting structural weak points. It's a coordinated. He never finished the sentence. The sound wasn't a boom. It was a deep, resonant thud, a gut punch that vibrated up from the soles of his feet. It was the sound of a giant's hammer striking the very bones of the city. A split second of silence followed, a held breath, and then the symphony of destruction began. The base of Celestial Tower B erupted, not in flame, but in a cloud of pulverized concrete. The shimmering glass facade spiderwebbed in 1,000 directions at once. The monorail track, its supports severed, buckled with a screech of tortured metal, sending a train car plummeting to the street below. Panic, sharp and shrill, ripped through the air as the river of people became a stampede. Full call! Green lightning enveloped Izuku as he pushed 10% of one for all through his body. The world slowed, the cacophony sharpening into distinct, terrible sounds. He saw everything. The train car falling, a family frozen in its path. The way the stress fractures were racing up the side of Tower B. Central, this is Crusader. Code Vermilion at the Celestial Towers. We have a coordinated structural attack. I need immediate deployment of all available heroes. Priority on containment and civilian evacuation of zones 1 through 3. Crusader was already moving, his voice a steel command amidst the chaos. Deku, with me. We establish a perimeter, but Izuku was already gone. He launched himself from the roof, a green comet arcing through the sky. Air pressure whipped past him. He had less than 3 seconds. He saw the family, a father shielding his 2 children, his face a mask of pure terror. Izuku adjusted his trajectory, angling his body. He hit the side of the falling monorail car with a deafening crang. The impact shuddered up his entire body, but he gritted his teeth, one for all cushioning the blow. He didn't stop it, he redirected it. The car, weighing dozens of tons, skewed sideways, scraping against the side of Tower C and crashing into the plaza fountain instead of the street. He landed lightly amidst the terrified, screaming crowd, the water from the destroyed fountain raining down around him. He didn't have time to check on the family. He was already moving. Everyone, this way! Away from the towers! He yelled, his voice amplified by his mask. His mind was a blur of calculations. The attack wasn't random. The vibrational devices had been placed with chilling precision. They hadn't just blown up the supports. They had fundamentally destabilized them, turning the building's own immense weight into a weapon. Tower B was groaning, a low, constant sound of a beast in its death throes. It was leaning, almost imperceptibly, toward Tower C. A domino effect. If B went, it would take the others with it. Thousands of people were still inside. Deku, report. What is your status? Crusader's voice was furious in his ear. You broke protocol. Saving people, sir. Izuku shot back, dodging a chunk of falling masonry. He saw it then, a car, dangling precariously from the ruined edge of the 5th-floor parking garage. It was a high-end electric sedan, and inside, a woman was struggling to unbuckle her child from a car seat in the back. The rebar holding the slab of concrete the car was resting on was bending, groaning. He was there in a flash, clinging to the side of the building. Ma'am! I'm going to get you out. The woman's eyes, wide with terror, locked onto him. My daughter! The buckle is jammed. Izuku peered inside. The girl, no older than 7, was crying silently, her little hands trying to help her mother with the stubborn buckle. He could see the problem. The impact had warped the mechanism. Okay, on 3, I'm going to rip the door off. Lean back, he commanded. He dug his fingers into the seam of the car door, channeling one for all into his grip. Metal screamed as he tore the door from its hinges and tossed it aside. Now your daughter. Give her to me. The mother quickly passed the small, trembling girl into his arms. My name is Yuki, the child whispered, her face buried in his shoulder. She clutched something in her tiny fist. It's okay, Yuki. I've got you, Izuku said, his voice softer than he thought possible in this chaos. He leaped to a stable section of the building and set her down. He was about to go back for the mother when the slab of concrete gave another violent lurch. "There's no time!" the mother screamed, scrambling out of the driver's side. "Go! Get her to safety, both of you!" Izuku insisted, reaching for her. Just then, Yuki pushed something into his gloved hand. "For being a hero," she mumbled. He glanced down. It was a small, cheap plastic keychain of All Might, in his classic "I am here" pose. A child's treasure. His heart clenched. "Thank you, Yuki," he said, his voice thick. He scooped her up again. "Ma'am, follow me! The central plaza is compromised. Go to the emergency stairwell at the base of Tower B, in the parking garage. It's a reinforced shelter. I'll meet you there. I promise I'll get you both out of this." The woman nodded, her face streaked with tears and dust, and scrambled toward the designated area. Izuku leaped away with Yuki, depositing her with a group of paramedics who were setting up a triage zone a safe distance away. "Stay with them. You'll be safe here," he told her, gently prying her arms from his neck. He tucked the small All Might keychain into a pouch on his belt. A promise. He turned back to the unfolding cataclysm, his mind racing faster than ever. The emergency shelter. He'd sent them to the base of Tower B, but his own analysis told him that the entire foundation was compromised. The shelter was reinforced, yes, but it wasn't rated for a full-scale structural collapse. He'd sent them from one danger zone into what could become a tomb. "I have to fix this." He shot into the smoky abyss of the underground parking garage. The air was thick with concrete dust. Emergency lights flickered, casting long, dancing shadows. The groaning of the tower above was a physical presence here, a constant, terrifying pressure. And then he saw it. It was the linchpin. The critical point of failure. A massive, cylindrical support pillar, 3 meters thick, right in the center of the garage. It was the main load-bearing column for the tower's central core. And it was fracturing. A huge, diagonal crack split it from floor to ceiling, widening with every groan from the structure above. Microfractures webbed out from it, shedding dust and pebbles. If it shattered, the tower's core would lose its primary support. The collapse wouldn't be a slow lean, it would be a catastrophic implosion. But the design, it was an older composite. Steel-reinforced high-tensile concrete. If he could apply a counterpressure, a continuous, immense force along the axis of the pillar, he could brace it, he could hold it together. He could use one for all. Not a smash. A press. A constant, controlled output of maybe 30–40%. He could wrap his arms around it, become a human clamp, and pour the power of his predecessors into this single point of failure. It would be agony. It would probably break every bone in his arms, but it could buy the time they needed. 20 minutes. 30. Enough time for the other heroes to complete the evacuation. Enough time to save the people in that shelter. Enough time to save the woman he promised, the mother of the girl who had given him a token of hope. He keyed his comm. "Crusader, I'm in the Tower B sublevel garage. I've found the critical failure point. It's the central support pillar. I can brace it. I can hold the tower." There was a burst of static, then Crusader's voice, strained and sharp. "Negative, Deku. Your location is a kill zone. Evacuate immediately. Your directive is to rendezvous with me at the Tower B Sky Lounge. We have a priority 1 extraction." Izuku stared at the groaning pillar. "Sir, you don't understand. This pillar is the only thing keeping the tower from pancaking. There are hundreds of people, maybe thousands still inside. I sent a mother and child to the emergency shelter down here. Did you not hear me, intern?" Crusader's voice was ice. "The Minister of Hero Affairs and his staff are trapped in the Sky Lounge. That is a priority 1 asset. Our orders, direct from the HPSC, are to secure the Minister. That is our only objective. We follow orders. Unsanctioned use of a high-output quirk in an unstable structure is a Tier 1 violation of the Heroic Conduct Act. If you fail, you will be solely liable for accelerating the collapse. Abort and rendezvous." Now, the words hit Izuku like a physical blow. A priority 1 asset. The Minister. A politician. His life was officially worth more than the hundreds of civilians in the floors below. More than the woman he'd made a promise to. More than the little girl named Yuki. Liability. Protocol. Orders. Sir? Izuku pleaded, his voice cracking. It's basic physics. The stress vectors are all converging here. With all due respect, the minister will die along with everyone else if this pillar goes. This is the only way to save anyone. Your analysis is irrelevant, Crusader snapped. My orders are not a suggestion. I am on my way to the Sky Lounge. I expect to see you there. Crusader out. The line went dead. Izuku stood frozen in the dust-filled darkness, the only light coming from the flickering emergency strobes and the green lightning that danced around his limbs. He looked at the massive, dying pillar. He heard the screams from above, muffled by layers of concrete. He felt the little plastic All Might keychain in his belt pouch. What would All Might do? The question, once his guiding star, now felt like a cruel joke. All Might would smile and save everyone. But how? By breaking the rules. By defying a direct order from a top 10 hero and the HPSC itself? That wasn't what a hero did. A hero was a part of the system. They upheld the law. He saw Crusader's logic, the cold, hard pragmatism of it. A guaranteed success, saving the minister, versus a high-risk gamble, saving everyone. The system was designed to choose the former, but he also saw the mother's terrified face. He saw Yuki's trusting eyes. I promise I'll get you both out of this. His body tensed. One for all surged, begging for release. He took a step toward the pillar. He could do it. He had to do it. But the voice of his mentor, the weight of 6 months of training, the very concept of being a pro-hero, held him back. We follow orders, Midoriya. It's what separates us from vigilantes. He hesitated. It was only for a moment. A single, drawn-out second of agonizing indecision. A war between the boy who wanted to save everyone and the trainee who wanted to be a proper hero. In that second, the world ended. It began with a sound he would never forget. Not a groan, but a sharp, crystalline crack. A sound like the planet's oldest bones snapping in two. He looked up. The diagonal fracture on the pillar exploded outward. The pillar didn't crumble. It shattered into a million pieces, vaporized by the colossal, instantaneous release of pressure. For a heartbeat, there was an unnatural silence. A weightlessness. Then gravity won. The ceiling of the parking garage came down. Izuku only had time to scream and oh. And throw himself back, one for all erupting around him in a desperate, instinctual shield. The force of the implosion was absolute. It wasn't like being hit. It was like being unmade. The air was punched from his lungs. The sound was a physical wall that deafened him. A white-hot roar that consumed everything. He was thrown like a rag doll, smashing through what was left of a concrete wall, and into the sublevel below. He lay there, buried in rubble, his ears ringing, his body a symphony of pain. Darkness. Dust. Silence. The terrible, profound silence of a tomb. It took him minutes to dig himself out. His arms were screaming, his ribs felt cracked, but nothing was broken. One for all had saved him. It had saved only him. He staggered to his feet in the ruin of the garage. Where the central pillar had stood, there was now just a mountain of twisted rebar and pancaked concrete floors. The emergency stairwell he had sent the woman to, it was gone. It was less than rubble. It was compressed into a solid, multi-ton slab of debris. There was no air, no space, no hope. Nothing could have survived. He fell to his knees. The analytical part of his brain shut down. The part that calculated and planned and strategized simply ceased to exist. There was only a hollow, cavernous emptiness. He ran his gloved hand over the spot on his belt where the keychain was. I promise. He had failed. No, he hadn't failed. He had been ready. He had the power, he had the plan. He was ordered to fail. The realization settled into the hollow space inside him, cold and heavy as lead. The system had not malfunctioned. The system had operated exactly as designed. It had weighed the lives of hundreds of ordinary people against the life of one important man and the risk of liability, and it had chosen to let them die. His promise was worthless. His power was worthless. All Might's smile, it was a lie. A beautiful, powerful lie to cover up the rotten, corroding truth of the society it was meant to protect. It was a marketing campaign for a product that was fundamentally, lethally flawed. He didn't cry. The pain was too vast, too deep for tears. It was a pressure building behind his eyes, in his throat, a cold, dense mass of fury and despair. He heard movement. A section of debris shifted, and Crusader dropped down, his silver costume covered in dust. He was supporting a wheezing, terrified man in a fine suit, the minister. "The tower is gone," Crusader said, his voice flat. He wasn't looking at Izuku, but at the catastrophic damage. The collapse, it was more aggressive than the simulations predicted. "The minister is safe. Our mission was a success." Izuku slowly, very slowly, got to his feet. He looked at Crusader. He looked at the pathetic, whimpering politician. He looked at the grave of hundreds of people. "Mission success? You said to stand down?" Izuku's voice was a rasp, alien to his own ears. It was devoid of heat, of passion. It was the sound of something breaking. Crusader finally met his gaze. There was no guilt in his eyes. Only a weary pragmatism. It was a tragic loss. Unavoidable. The villains who planted these devices are to blame. The HPSC will handle the official inquiry. Our report will state that you assisted in the successful extraction of the Priority 1 asset. Do not, under any circumstances, mention your unauthorized presence in this sector or your alternate proposal. It would only complicate the narrative. Complicate the narrative. The words echoed in the tomb of Izuku's idealism. The lives of hundreds of people, the death of a mother whose daughter was now an orphan, his broken promise. It was all just an inconvenient detail that would complicate the narrative. Izuku looked at his own hands, still crackling with faint green sparks. This power. The sacred torch passed down through generations, meant to be a symbol of hope. What a fool he had been. It wasn't a torch to light the way. It was a weapon. And he had been trying to use it in service to the very monsters who decided who was worth saving and who was acceptable collateral damage. He turned his back on Crusader and the minister. "Midoriya, where are you going?" Crusader demanded. "The rescue operation is just beginning. All heroes are to report for search and recovery." Izuku kept walking, his steps steady over the uneven rubble. He didn't look back. Search and recovery. Digging for bodies that the system had condemned. Performing for the cameras to show that the heroes did all they could. It was a farce. A sick, elaborate piece of theater. He walked past the arriving heroes. He saw the flash of Endeavor's flames, the blur of Mirko rocketing toward the wreckage. The cavalry, arriving on schedule to clean up the mess. They were all just actors in the same play. He reached into his pouch and his fingers closed around the small, plastic All Might keychain. He could feel the cheap seams, the sharp edges of the molded plastic. He didn't crush it. He simply held it, the symbol of his shattered faith. He walked out of the dust cloud and into the screaming chaos of the city. But he was deaf to it. He was a ghost at his own funeral. The hopeful boy, the earnest fan, the hero in training named Deku, he had died in that garage. He died in the moment of his hesitation. He died when he saw the cold, systemic logic in his mentor's eyes. He slipped into a darkened alleyway, away from the flashing lights and the prying eyes. He pulled the tattered hood of his costume up over his head, casting his face in shadow. The green lightning of One for All flickered one last time and then died, leaving him in darkness. The name Deku, once a slur he had reclaimed as a badge of honor, now felt like the punchline to a cosmic joke. Useless. He had been useless. He'd played by the rules and people had died. Never again. The system wasn't broken. It was working as intended. And if the system itself was the true villain, then being a hero within it was the ultimate act of complicity. A new analysis began to form in the cold, clear ruins of his mind. Not of heroes' quirks, but of society's weaknesses. Not of how to save people, but of how to tear down the institution that failed them. The world didn't need another smiling symbol. It needed a surgeon. And surgery was a brutal, bloody business. Izuku Midoriya, the ninth holder of One for All, walked away from the light. He didn't know where he was going. He only knew that the path of the hero was a dead end. From the rubble of his dream, a new purpose, cold and terrible and absolute, began to take shape. He was no longer a hero in training, he was the consequence. 6 months, 182 days. A chasm of time that had swallowed Izuku Midoriya whole, leaving behind nothing but a ghost-shaped hole in the world. The official investigation had run its course, a flurry of procedural activity that ultimately yielded nothing. He was a statistic now, another name on the National Registry of Missing Persons, filed away in a sterile manila folder. For the Hero Public Safety Commission and the police, the case was cold, relegated to the back burner of unsolvable tragedies. But for Katsuki Bakugo, it was a wound that refused to scar over. It festered, raw and burning, fueling a relentless, all-consuming fire. The rain fell in hard, slanted sheets, turning the neon signs of Kamino's seedious district into blurry, bleeding watercolors. It was a district the top-tier heroes generally ignored, a festering tangle of narrow alleys and crumbling facades where small-time villainy was the local economy. Bakugo stood under a rusted fire escape, the rhythmic drumming of water on metal a counterpoint to the violent throbbing in his temples. He was soaked, his tracksuit plastered to his skin, but he didn't feel the cold. The rage kept him warm. He was looking at 3 men huddled in the mouth of an alley, their faces lit by the eerie glow of a flickering street lamp. They were lowlifes, dealers in bootleg trigger knockoffs, but they were also information brokers of a sort. They heard things. Bakugo didn't bother with subtlety. He walked into the alley, his posture a declaration of war. The sound of his boots on the wet asphalt was loud, deliberate. The lead thug, a man with spiderwebs tattooed up his neck, straightened up, a sneer twisting his lips. Well, look what we have here. A lost little hero in training. You're a long way from your fancy school, kid. Bakugo didn't stop until he was inches from the man's face. The rain dripped from the tips of his spiky blonde hair into his eyes, but he didn't blink. 6 months ago, he said, his voice a low, dangerous growl. A kid went missing. Green hair, freckles, looked like a damn puppy. Talks too much. Muttered all the time. Some of you bottom feeders must have heard something. A kidnapping. A new recruit for some back alley gang, a body. I don't care how small the rumor is. Talk. The spiderweb thug laughed, a dry, grating sound. We don't talk to heroes. Now scram before you get hurt. He puffed out his chest, trying to project an aura of intimidation that fell completely flat against Bakugo's wall of incandescent fury. Bakugo's response was a blur of motion. He grabbed the man by the front of his jacket, slammed him against the wet brick wall, and held him there, his feet dangling inches off the ground. The man's 2 cronies flinched back, their bravado evaporating into the misty air. I'm not a hero right now. Bakugo snarled, his palm beginning to spark, the smell of ozone and nitroglycerin cutting through the damp air. I'm the guy who's about to pop your skull like a firecracker if you don't start talking. I've been asking nicely for 6 months. I'm done asking nicely. The man's eyes were wide with terror. I don't know anything. I swear. Wrong answer. Bakugo growled, a small, controlled explosion erupting from his palm right next to the man's ear. The crack was deafening in the narrow space. The thug screamed, clutching the side of his head. Okay, he shrieked. There are whispers. That's all. About a ghost, a shadow that's been hitting the small-time crews. Comes out of nowhere, knows everything about your operation, and just takes it. Money, supplies, data. Doesn't kill, but he leaves guys so terrified they just pack up and leave town. They call him the architect or something stupid like that. No one's seen his face. Bakugo's grip tightened. What does he look like? I told you, no one knows. Always hooded, moves like lightning. Some say his power looks like green sparks. Green sparks. The fire in Bakugo's chest surged. It was him. It had to be. That damn nerd. Where? Bakugo demanded. Where has he been seen? I don't know. He's a myth. A story we tell to scare new guys. A thin, reedy voice cut through the rain from the mouth of the alley. That's enough, young Bakugo. Bakugo's head snapped around. Standing there, looking impossibly thin and frail under the weak lamplight, was Toshinori Yagi. He wasn't in his all-might form. He was just a man, his oversized trench coat hanging off his skeletal frame, a worn fedora shielding his gaunt face from the worst of the downpour. He looked like a ghost himself, haunted by a past that was too heavy for his withered body to carry. Bakugo dropped the thug, who crumpled to the ground, gasping. "What are you doing here, All Might?" he spat, not bothering to hide the venom in his tone. "The same thing as you, I imagine," Tashinori said, his voice weary. He gave a shallow cough, dabbing his mouth with a handkerchief. "Chasing shadows. But this is not the way. You can't strong-arm the truth out of men like this. It will only create more lies. It's the only way that gets me answers." Bakugo shot back, stalking toward him. "While you and the other so-called pros are sitting on your hands, filing your useless reports, I'm out here. I've been out here every night. This is the first real lead I've gotten in months." The architect. Green sparks. "It's him." Tashinori's expression, already grim, darkened further. "We've investigated those rumors. They're inconsistent. Some say the sparks are blue, others say it's a man with a teleportation quirk. It's underworld folklore, young Bakugo. A bogeyman. And you just accept that?" Bakugo yelled, jabbing a finger at Tashinori's chest. The sheer force of his rage made the skeletal man take a half-step back. "You, of all people? You gave him that power! You know what he's like. He's a self-sacrificing idiot who would absolutely go off on some stupid, secret mission by himself because he thinks it's the only way to save everyone. He's not dead. He's not kidnapped. He's doing something, and he's too damn stubborn to ask for help." The denial was a shield. The only thing that kept Bakugo from shattering under the weight of the alternative, that Izuku was gone forever, and that the last real conversation they'd had was an argument. Tashinori's shoulders slumped. The guilt was a visible thing, carving deeper lines into his face. "I know his heart, my boy. That's why this is so difficult. I have gone over that day 1,000 times in my head. The collapse, the chaos. If he were alive, he would have reached out. To me. To his mother. The fact that he hasn't," he trailed off, the unspoken conclusion hanging heavy and suffocating in the air between them. "I failed him. As a mentor, I put a burden on him that was too great, and when he needed guidance, I was not there. The HPSC believes he was likely caught in the secondary collapse of the underground structures, his body, unrecoverable." "The HPSC is a bunch of useless bureaucrats," Bakugo roared. "And you're a fool if you believe them. Deku is not a victim. He never has been. He's a fighter. He's out there, I know it." His voice cracked on the last few words, a hairline fracture in his armor a fury. He couldn't stand the look of pity on Tashinori's face. He couldn't stand the shared grief that felt like an admission of defeat. He shoved past the older man, his shoulder bumping him hard. "I'm going to find him," Bakugo snarled, not looking back. "And when I do, I'm going to beat the ever-loving crap out of him for making his mom cry for 6 months. Then I'm dragging him back to Yui myself." He stormed off into the rain, leaving Tashinori Yagi alone in the alley. The retired hero watched him go, a profound sorrow in his sunken eyes. He wanted to believe the boy. Oh, how he wanted to. But hope was a luxury he felt he no longer deserved. All he had left was the knowing, all-consuming guilt of a teacher who had lost his most precious student, the inheritor of his sacred trust. He was the keeper of a dead legacy, the steward of a stolen future. Miles away, and far below the rain-slicked streets, the world was dry, cool, and silent save for the low hum of repurposed electronics. This was the heart of the architect's domain, an abandoned section of Muzutafu's old subway system, a forgotten relic of a bygone era. The station platform was his central command. It wasn't a lair, it was a laboratory. The walls, once covered in faded advertisements and layers of grime, were now obscured by a vast, interconnected web of information. Maps of the city were overlaid with schematics of power grids, sewer systems, and hero patrol routes. Photos of politicians, corporate executives, and pro-heroes were pinned to corkboards, connected by a dizzying network of red, yellow, and blue strings. Timelines, financial records, leaked internal memos, psychological profiles. It was the physical manifestation of a brilliant, obsessive mind unleashed. It was notebook number 14, expanded to the scale of a city. In the center of this web stood the man who had once been Izuku Midoriya. He was no longer the boy who wore his heart on his sleeve. The adolescent softness was gone from his face, replaced by the sharp, angular lines of someone who ate to live but found no pleasure in it. His eyes, once bright pools of earnest emotion, were now cold, analytical chips of jade. They didn't radiate warmth. They scanned, processed, and assessed. The freckles were still there, a faint echo of the boy he used to be, but they seemed out of place on this new, hardened canvas. He wore simple, functional black cargo pants and a dark gray compression shirt that did little to hide the wiry, dense muscle he'd built. His old costume was gone, cannibalized for parts. The iron-soled boots remained, reinforced and silenced. The mouth guard was gone, replaced by a sleek, black half-mask that covered his nose and jaw, fitted with a voice modulator. The most prominent feature was the deep green hood of his old gamma costume, now part of a light, armored cloak. It kept his face and telltale hair perpetually in shadow. He was a silhouette, a concept, the architect. His routine was Spartan, governed by ruthless efficiency. He slept in 4-hour cycles on a simple cot in an old ticket booth. He ate nutrient paste and protein bars. His waking hours were divided into 3 pursuits: data acquisition, resource appropriation, and physical refinement. The data acquisition was his primary obsession. He had become a master hacker, using his intellect to slip through firewalls and backdoors, siphoning secrets from the servers of hero agencies, corporations, and government bodies. He learned of the Hero Public Safety Commission's black funds, their illegal surveillance programs, and the politically motivated cover-ups of heroic misconduct. He saw the rot in excruciating detail. The resource appropriation was a more direct application of his power. He would target mid-level criminal organizations, smuggling rings, extortion rackets, data thieves, groups large enough to have resources but small enough that the top-tier heroes wouldn't get involved. He never announced his arrival. He would simply appear in their headquarters, a phantom of green lightning and chilling purpose. He was doing it now. In a dusty warehouse on the industrial waterfront, a group of 8 men were counting stacks of cash from their latest illicit quirk enhancer deal. Their leader, a brute named Kento with a minor super-strength quirk, was laughing about how the heroes were too busy with the fallout from the Celestial Towers incident to police their turf. The warehouse doors didn't open. The shadows in the corner simply coalesced. From the darkness, the architect stepped forward, his hooded form seeming to drink the light around him. Kento and his men scrambled for their weapons. "Who the hell are you?" The architect's voice, filtered through the modulator, was a calm, synthetic monotone that held no trace of Izuku Midoriya. "You are Kento Tanaka. Quirk, leverage. You can amplify the force of your own muscular contractions by a factor of 5, but only for 3 seconds at a time, with a 5-minute refractory period. You are currently diverting 10% of your profits to pay off Pro Hero Shield Bearer to ignore your shipments. The money is wired to an offshore account in the Cayman Islands, account number 74B39 Delta." The men froze, their faces pale with shock. Kento's bravado crumbled. How do you know that?" "I know everything," the architect stated. It was not a boast, it was a simple fact. "Your operation is now concluded. All of your assets, financial, material, and informational, are being reappropriated. You will disband this group. You will leave this city. You will not engage in criminal activity again. If you do, I will know. And my next visit will not be a conversation." Kento, desperate, roared and charged, his fists glowing with the telltale energy of his quirk. "I'll kill you!" The architect didn't even seem to move. He simply shifted his weight. As Kento's punch came flying, he sidestepped with impossible speed, his hand darting out. He didn't strike. He tapped. A single finger, glowing with a faint, controlled flicker of one for all, touched Kento's elbow. It wasn't a smash. It was a precise, surgical application of force, delivered directly to the ulnar nerve. Kento screamed, a high, piercing sound, and dropped to the ground, his entire arm spasming uncontrollably. The pain was excruciating, electric, but not permanently damaging. It was a lesson in power. The architect hadn't needed to use even 1% of his strength to utterly neutralize him. He looked at the other 7 men, who were frozen in absolute terror. The choice is yours. They dropped their weapons as if they were red hot. Within 10 minutes, the architect had downloaded the contents of their servers onto a secured drive, transferred their funds to one of his own encrypted accounts, and vanished back into the shadows, leaving behind 8 broken, terrified men and a dead criminal enterprise. He returned to his subway station, the hum of his servers a welcoming chorus. He wasn't doing this for wealth or power in the traditional sense. These resources were tools. They were the funding, the equipment, and the leverage he would need to perform his societal surgery. He walked over to a small, steel lockbox on a makeshift desk. He opened it. Inside, nestled on a bed of black foam, was a single item, a cheap, plastic All-Might keychain. He picked it up. He didn't feel the pang of sadness or nostalgia he once had. He felt a cold, sharp clarity. This object was his memento mori, a reminder of the death of his idealism. It was the symbol of the promise he was ordered to break. It was the anchor that kept him tethered to his new purpose, ensuring he would never again be swayed by naive sentiment. He looked at the plastic, smiling face and saw not a hero, but a lie. A beautiful, damning lie that had cost hundreds of people their lives. The system doesn't need a new symbol, he thought, his jaw tightening under the mask. It needs to be broken. It needs a controlled demolition, not the mindless chaos a fool like Shigaraki desires. Burn out the rot, expose the corruption, and from the ashes, force something better to grow. Something honest. His ideology was fully formed, a crystalline structure of cold logic built on a foundation of profound grief. He was not a villain. Villains sought personal gain, or destruction for its own sake. He was a necessary evil. He was the cure the world was too afraid to administer to itself. But he knew he couldn't do it alone. His analysis had shown him that. He needed specialists. He needed people who, like him, had been failed or discarded by the very system they were supposed to trust. He needed not minions but pillars. The first bricks in his new foundation. And he had already found his first candidate. He pulled up a file on his central monitor. The face of a UE student stared back. Tired eyes, a perpetually unimpressed expression, and a shock of wild indigo hair. Hitoshi Shinso. Quirk, brainwashing. General Studies course. Rejected from the hero course twice. Reason, quirk ill-suited for direct combat and potential for misuse. The architect's lip curled in a humorless smile. Potential for misuse. The HPSC, an organization that sanctioned bribery and cover-ups, was worried about Shinso's potential for misuse. The hypocrisy was galling. They didn't fear his potential for evil. They feared his potential for control. They feared a power they couldn't easily quantify and market. He had been observing Shinso for weeks. He watched him train alone, pushing his body to its limits, trying desperately to compensate for the system's prejudice. He saw the frustration, the resentment, the burning desire to prove them all wrong. He saw a powerful tool being left to rust. It was time to make his first move. The Gamma Gym at Yuri was a cavernous space, echoing with the sounds of explosions, impacts, and shouted commands. First-year hero students were running a joint combat drill, their vibrant quirks a kaleidoscope of power and potential. Todoroki's ice walls shot up, blocking a volley of tape from Zero. Uraraka floated debris, practicing her meteor storm. It was a picture of heroic progress. On the periphery, in a designated sparring zone for non-hero course students, Hitoshi Shinso dodged a clumsy punch from a business course student with a minor hardening quirk. "Come on, Shinso!" Vlad King called from the sidelines, his arms crossed, his expression impatient. "Your capture weapon is an extension of your body. You're hesitating. You won't always be able to rely on your voice." Shinso gritted his teeth, sweat stinging his eyes. He flicked his wrist, sending the capture weapon arcing out. It was a poor imitation of Aizawa-sensei's fluid grace. The cloth wrapped loosely around his opponent's arm, who simply flexed and broke the hold. "See? Insufficient binding strength," Vlad barked. "Your quirk is top tier for intelligence and infiltration, but on the front lines, you're a liability until your physical skills match it. The commission has standards for a reason." Shinso's shoulders slumped. He knew. He knew it better than anyone. He spent every spare moment training, his muscles aching constantly, but it was like trying to catch up to a train that had left the station years ago. He was surrounded by people who were born with quirks suited for a camera, for a fight. His was a scalpel in a room full of sledgehammers, and no one seemed to have any use for a surgeon. The session ended. The hero course students were laughing, patting each other on the back. Shinso quietly gathered his capture weapon, feeling the familiar, bitter sting of inadequacy. He saw Aizawa-sensei watching him from across the gym with a thoughtful, almost sympathetic look, but it didn't help. Sympathy didn't get him a provisional license. He left the gym as the sun began to set, casting long shadows across the campus grounds. He was alone, his footsteps the only sound. He was always alone. A frustrating day. The voice came from the shadows beneath a large oak tree. It was calm, low, and synthetic, like a computer trying to replicate human speech. Shinso froze, his hand instinctively going to the capture weapon on his belt. He scanned the darkness. "Who's there?" he called out, his voice steady despite the sudden jolt of adrenaline. A figure detached itself from the deeper shadows. Tall, cloaked, his face completely obscured by a hood and a black mask. The setting sun glinted off the edges of what looked like tactical gear beneath the cloak. Shinso's blood ran cold. This was no student. The air around the man felt heavy, charged with a quiet, predatory stillness. "Your frustration is justified, Hitoshi Shinso," the figure said, taking a slow step forward. "You possess a quirk that could dismantle entire organizations, end hostage situations without a single casualty, and extract confessions from the most hardened villains. It is a gift of unparalleled strategic value." Shinso took a step back, his mind racing. This was a villain. On your grounds. How? The security was supposed to be absolute. "What do you want?" "I want to offer you an alternative to beating your head against the wall," the architect continued, his synthesized voice unwavering. "You are trying to win their approval, the approval of men like Vlad King, of the commission he represents. You are asking for permission to be powerful from the very people who are terrified of what your power represents." Every word was a perfectly aimed dart, striking the heart of Shinso's deepest insecurities. This stranger understood his plight with a terrifying, intimate clarity. "They call your quirk villainous," the architect said, tilting his hooded head. "They say it's unethical, yet they champion heroes whose quirks level city blocks, causing billions in damages and endangering countless civilians as collateral. Their morality is not a code, it is a brand. Your quirk cannot be easily branded, so they discard you." "Who are you?" Shinso asked again, his voice tighter now. "I am a builder," the architect replied. "I am laying the foundation for a new order, one that operates on logic, not on popularity rankings, one where a power like yours is not feared, but revered as the essential tool it is." He took another step closer. Shinso could feel the sheer pressure of the man's presence. It wasn't a quirk, it was an aura of absolute, unshakable confidence. "They fear your power because they can't control it," the architect said, his voice dropping to an almost hypnotic whisper. "With me, you will use it to make them listen, not just the villains, but the corrupt heroes, the complacent politicians, the blind public. You will make them listen to the truth." He stopped, standing just a few feet away. The offer hung in the air, a tangible thing. It was everything Shinso had ever wanted: validation, purpose, a chance to use his gift to its fullest potential without apology. But the path the stranger was offering was dark, leading far away from the light of heroism he had so desperately chased. Shinso stared into the black void of the man's hood, searching for a face, for any hint of the person behind the mask and the synthesized voice. He found nothing but his own reflection in the dark lenses he could just barely make out. "Join me, Hitoshi Shinso," the architect concluded, his voice resonating with the conviction of a prophet. "And you will never be powerless again." The world seemed to fall silent. The distant sounds of the city, the rustle of the leaves, it all faded away. There was only the hooded man, the impossible offer, and the choice that would define the rest of his life. Shinso's heart hammered in his chest, a frantic, terrified drumbeat of fear, and a single, treacherous note of hope. Hitoshi Shinso lay on his back in his Spartan dorm room, staring at the blank white ceiling. It had been 4 days since the hooded figure had materialized from the campus shadows, 4 days since the impossible offer had been laid at his feet. Sleep had become a stranger, replaced by a circular, exhausting debate that played out in the quiet hours of the night. "Join me, Hitoshi Shinso, and you will never be powerless again." The words were a brand on his thoughts, the synthetic voice echoing with a promise so potent it terrified him. He had spent his entire life fighting the perception that his quirk, brainwashing, was inherently villainous. He'd scraped and clawed his way into UA, endured the condescending glances and the backhanded compliments, all for a single, burning desire, to prove that a power like his could be used for good. He wanted to be a hero, but what if the very definition of hero was the thing holding him back? The stranger, the architect, hadn't spoken like a villain. There was no mad cackle, no boastful monologue about world domination. There was only a chilling, incisive logic. He had dissected Shinso's life, his frustrations, and the systemic prejudice he faced with the precision of a master surgeon. He hadn't tried to corrupt him with promises of wealth or power for its own sake. He had offered him purpose. He had offered him validation. Shinso rolled onto his side, scrubbing a hand over his tired face. He'd reported the encounter, of course. He wasn't a fool. He'd gone straight to Aizawa-sensei, detailing the conversation as best he could. His teacher had listened with that unnervingly still focus of his dark eyes unreadable. Security was tripled. An internal investigation was launched, but Shinso could tell that Aizawa and the other faculty saw it as a recruitment attempt by some new, ambitious villain group trying to poach a disgruntled student. They were looking at it as a security breach, an external threat. They didn't understand the insidious nature of the offer. They didn't understand how it felt to be seen, truly seen, for the first time, not as a risk to be managed, but as an asset to be utilized. The architect's words weren't a temptation to do evil. They were a temptation to be effective. He pushed himself up, the unease in his gut too strong to ignore. He walked to his window, looking out over the quiet, sleeping campus. Was this all a lie? A manipulation? Almost certainly, but the truth in the man's critique of hero society was undeniable. He saw it every day in the gym, in the news, in the way people's eyes would widen with a flicker of fear when he mentioned his quirk. He was powerless. Not because his quirk was weak, but because the system had no place for it. His phone buzzed on his nightstand. A news alert. He glanced at it distractedly. Muzutafu Chronicle. Philanthropist Kaito Ishikawa pledges 500 million yen to Hero Pension Fund. Shinso scoffed. Kaito Ishikawa. The CEO of Azure Horizons Logistics, a shipping magnate whose face was plastered on every business magazine. He was the darling of the city's elite, a man who built his pristine public image on a foundation of massive charitable donations to hero-related causes. He was untouchable, a pillar of the community, a friend to heroes. Shinso's thoughts drifted back to a conversation he'd overheard between two police detectives Aizawa had been consulting with. They'd been talking about a case, a human trafficking ring operating out of the docks. They called it the Azure Syndicate. They had whispers, informants, grieving families who claimed their loved ones were taken after applying for overseas jobs with a subsidiary of Ishikawa's company. But they had no clean evidence. Every witness clammed up. Every paper trail led to a dead end or a shell corporation shielded by a phalanx of high-priced lawyers. The heroes couldn't touch him. The police couldn't touch him. He was insulated by his wealth, his political connections, and the very system he so generously funded. Shinso looked at the picture of Ishikawa on his phone, the man's perfectly white smile beaming at the camera as he shook hands with the chief of police. He felt a familiar, bitter taste in his mouth. This was the world the heroes protected. A world where a man like this could operate with impunity while he, Shinso, was treated with suspicion for the power he was born with. Suddenly he felt a strange, creeping sense of dread. The architect's promise echoed again. With me, you will use it to make them listen. What if this wasn't just a philosophical debate? What if it was a prelude? He sat on his bed, the phone still in his hand, and waited. He didn't know what he was waiting for, but an unnerving certainty settled in his bones. The architect was a builder, he'd said, and tonight, it felt like he was about to lay his first stone. The Muzutafu Bay docklands were a different world from the gleaming city center. Here, the air was heavy with the smell of salt, rust, and diesel. The only sounds were the lonely cry of a distant foghorn, the creak of mooring lines, and the rhythmic lapping of black water against the barnacle-encrusted piers. It was a place of transience, where things, and people, could disappear without a trace. Pier 7 was the private domain of Azure Horizons Logistics. It was a fortress of corrugated steel and concrete. Razor wire topped the perimeter fences, and high-intensity floodlights bleached the night, creating pools of stark white and pockets of impenetrable black. Guards in tactical gear patrolled the perimeter with augmented dogs, their quirks, minor enhancements like sharpened senses or hardened skin, making them more than a match for common thugs. Tonight was a big night. A shipment was being prepared. Not cargo, but assets. In the center of the yard sat a row of 10 refrigerated shipping containers, their power units humming quietly. They were indistinguishable from the hundreds of others stacked around the port, except for the small, discreet Azure logo stenciled on their sides. Inside the pier's main office, Kaito Ishikawa watched the preparations on a bank of security monitors, a glass of expensive whiskey in his hand. He was a handsome man in his late 40s, his tailored suit immaculate, his silvering hair perfectly coiffed. He looked like a man without a care in the world, the picture of corporate success. "Status report," he said into the intercom on his desk, his voice smooth as silk. A gruff voice crackled back. "All clear, Mr. Ishikawa. Perimeter is secure. The consignment is prepped and ready for loading. The transport vessel arrives at 0400. Excellent," Ishikawa said, taking a sip of his whiskey. "Ensure all protocols are followed. No loose ends. The clients for this batch are particularly discerning." "Understood, sir." Ishikawa leaned back in his leather chair, a faint, self-satisfied smile on his lips. He was invincible. He had bought police officials, had pro-heroes on his informal payroll, and owned politicians. The hero system, with its endless regulations and need for warrants and probable cause, was the best security system his money could buy. It protected him from his enemies and from itself. He took another sip of whiskey. On one of the monitors he saw 2 of his guards stop at the far end of the pier, their dogs sniffing at the air. One of them raised his hand to his earpiece. Before he could speak, his head snapped back at an unnatural angle, and he crumpled to the ground in a silent heap. His partner spun around, hand reaching for a weapon, but a flicker of green lightning erupted from the shadow of a container stack, and he dropped just as silently. The 2 dogs whined once, then sat down, placidly wagging their tails. Ishikawa sat bolt upright, his glass clattering on the desk. "What was that?" "Unit 4, report," only static answered. His heart began to hammer against his ribs. He mashed the button for the general alarm. Nothing happened. The piercing siren that should have split the night remained silent. He tried the lights. They didn't change. He was cut off. Frantically, he toggled through the camera feeds. One by one, they went dark, replaced by a simple, stylized logo, a balanced scale, with one side holding a feather and the other a human brain. The Veritas order. The last active camera was the one pointed at the main yard, at the row of refrigerated containers, and standing in the center of the frame, as if he had materialized from the air itself, was a figure in a dark, hooded cloak. The architect, panic, cold and sharp, seized Ishikawa. He grabbed the emergency satellite phone from his desk drawer, his lifeline, his direct connection to a certain high-ranking HPSC official. He jabbed in the number. As it began to ring, the door to his office was kicked open. Not with a bang, but with a sharp thud, the reinforced lock shearing clean from its housing. The architect stood there, a phantom of green and black against the flashing emergency lights of the hallway. "Kaito Ishikawa," the modulated voice said, calm and devoid of emotion. "Your operation is concluded." Ishikawa's expensive training in crisis management vanished. He threw the heavy glass decanter from his desk at the intruder. The architect didn't even flinch. He simply raised a hand, and a flicker of green energy flared around his fingers. The decanter stopped dead in midair, inches from his mask, held by an invisible force, a miniature, controlled air cannon pressure wall. It hung there for a second before dropping to the floor and shattering. Ishikawa scrambled backward, his hand fumbling in his desk drawer for the pistol he kept there. He was a wealthy man. He had a quirk, a minor but useful one. Panic button, his advisors had called it. It emitted a subsonic pulse that induced a sense of overwhelming terror in anyone within a 10-foot radius, leaving them paralyzed with fear. He activated it. A wave of invisible energy rolled toward the architect. It had no effect. The figure simply tilted his head, as if observing a curious phenomenon. Your quirk relies on stimulating the amygdala via low-frequency resonance, the architect stated clinically. It is ineffective against a target who can manipulate air pressure to create a localized sonic buffer, or one whose resolve is simply greater than your ability to induce fear. He moved. It wasn't a run, it was a blink. One moment he was at the door, the next he was standing over Ishikawa, his hand clamped around the man's wrist. The pistol clattered to the floor. The grip was like steel. You have trafficked 278 individuals in the last 3 years, the architect said, his voice a low monotone that was far more terrifying than any shout. Men, women, and children, sold for forced labor, illegal quirk experimentation, and personal amusement. You have paid 87 million yen in bribes to 16 officials, including pro-hero shield-bearer and police commissioner Tadashi. You believed your wealth and connections made you untouchable. He twisted Ishikawa's arm. The snap of bone was sickeningly loud in the quiet office. Ishikawa screamed, a raw, high-pitched sound of pure agony and terror. You were mistaken, the architect finished. He dragged the screaming, weeping magnate out of his office and toward the center of the yard, where the rest of his guards lay in neat, unconscious rows. They were all alive, but their bodies were twisted at odd angles, dislocated shoulders, shattered kneecaps, broken wrists. Each one was neutralized with brutal, anatomical precision. The architect stopped in front of the refrigerated containers. With one hand, he tore the heavy locking mechanism off the nearest one and wrenched the door open. The stench of sweat, fear, and unwashed bodies rolled out. Inside, crammed together in the freezing darkness, were 30 people. Their faces were gaunt, their eyes hollow with despair. They flinched from the sudden light, expecting another tormentor. The architect looked at them, then back at the whimpering Ishikawa. He pressed a small device in his palm. All around the pier, tiny, spider-like drones, previously hidden in the shadows, whirred to life. Their optical lenses glowed red, and across Japan, every screen went black. Shinso was staring at Ishikawa's face on his phone when it happened. The screen flickered, died, and then relit. It was no longer a news article. It was a live video feed. The perspective was shaky, dark, but he could make out the shapes of shipping containers and the glint of floodlights. In the center of the frame, a hooded figure stood over a man who was weeping on the ground. On instinct, Shinso grabbed his laptop and opened it. The UA homepage was gone, replaced by the same live feed. He flicked on the small TV in his room. A late-night talk show host's face vanished, replaced by the same chilling scene. Public billboards outside his window, phones in millions of hands, televisions in millions of homes, all hijacked, all showing the same thing. A logo appeared for a moment, the scales of Veritas. Then, the modulated voice filled the air, not just from his devices, but seeming to echo from the city itself. Good evening, citizens of Japan. The voice began, calm and measured. You do not know me. My name is Architect. I am speaking to you now from Pier 7 in the Musutafu Bay Docklands. For the last 3 years, this pier has served as the central hub for the Azure Syndicate, the largest human trafficking operation on the eastern seaboard. The camera feed shifted, zooming in on the weeping man. It was Kaido Ishikawa, his face a mask of tear-streaked terror, his arm bent at a sickening angle. This is Kaido Ishikawa. The architect's voice continued. You know him as a philanthropist, a captain of industry, a friend to heroes. The truth is somewhat different. He is a slaver, a monster who preys on the desperate and the hopeful, selling them into bondage. The feed split. On one side, the live view of the docks. On the other, a cascade of information began to flow. Bank records showing massive, untraceable payments. A recorded phone call, Ishikawa's smooth voice discussing the consignment with an anonymous client. Photos of missing persons, their smiling faces juxtaposed with a list of the Azure Syndicate's victims. Shinso felt a cold knot tighten in his stomach. This was it. This was the sermon. You are likely asking yourselves, why has this been allowed to happen? Where were the heroes? Where were the police? The architect's voice was relentless, peeling back the layers of society with methodical precision. They were here. They knew. But they were unable, or unwilling, to act. A new face appeared on the screen. Pro-hero shield-bearer, a C-lister known for his defensive quirk and his numerous corporate sponsorships. His picture was placed next to a bank statement showing a direct deposit from one of Ishikawa's shell corporations. An audio file played, shield-bearer's gruff voice promising to lose the paperwork on any civilian complaints regarding Pier 7. Another face, Police Commissioner Tadashi. Another set of bank records. Another damning audio file, this one discussing the sabotage of a formal investigation. The system you place your faith in is not broken, the architect declared, his voice cutting through the stunned silence that had fallen over the nation. It is corrupt. It is a machine that runs on money, public image, and political power. Justice is a commodity, and men like Ishikawa have priced you out of the market. The laws that are meant to protect you are instead used as a shield by the wealthy and the powerful to protect themselves. The heroes you worship are too entangled in bureaucracy, too afraid of liability, too compromised by their own sponsors to act. The main camera panned, showing the open container, the terrified faces of the captives huddling within. These people are the consequence of that system, the architect stated. They are the acceptable losses in a society that prioritizes procedure over people. The Veritas Order was formed for them, for the ones who fall through the cracks. For the victims the system deems too inconvenient to save. He stepped forward, his cloaked form dominating the screen. We are not villains. We are not terrorists. We are the consequence of your inaction. We are the cure you are too afraid to administer to yourselves. We are a scalpel, here to excise the cancer that you have allowed to grow in the heart of your society. This is not a declaration of war. It is a diagnosis. The architect reached down and hauled Ishikawa to his feet by his hair, forcing his terrified, blubbering face into the camera. Tonight, we have dismantled the Azure Syndicate. We have exposed its leader and his collaborators. The evidence you see is being simultaneously delivered to every major news outlet and independent journalist in the country. It is irrefutable. We have done what your heroes would not, what your police could not. He shoved Ishikawa back to the ground. This is our first act. It will not be our last. We will find the rot, wherever it hides, in the boardrooms, in the hero agencies, in the government itself. We will drag it into the light. You have been living in a comfortable lie. From tonight you will live in the uncomfortable truth. We are the Veritas Order. And the truth will be heard. The screen went black. A profound, echoing silence fell over the city. In his room, Shinso stared at his blank TV, his heart hammering against his ribs. His breath was shallow. He felt dizzy, as if the entire world had just tilted on its axis. It was horrifying. It was illegal. It was brutal. And it was magnificent. The architect hadn't just defeated a villain. He had eviscerated an entire corrupt ecosystem with one precise, devastating strike. He hadn't used a city-leveling smash or a dramatic finishing move. He had used information as a weapon. He had used the truth as a wrecking ball. He had done exactly what he said he would do. This wasn't chaos. It wasn't destruction for its own sake. It was, as he'd said, surgery. Shinso thought of his own power. The ability to make anyone answer a question. To make them tell the truth. In the hands of a pro-hero, it was a tool for interrogating captured thugs, to be used with a mountain of paperwork and oversight. In the hands of the architect, it was a key that could unlock every dirty secret in the world. It was a weapon that could bring the entire corrupt edifice crashing down. The shadows in the corner of his room deepened, coalescing into a familiar, hooded shape. The architect stood there, as silent as the grave, the faint smell of ozone and sea salt clinging to him. He had bypassed UA's heightened security as if it were a beaded curtain. Shinso didn't flinch. He wasn't afraid. He simply looked at the figure, his mind clear for the first time in days. You saw? The modulated voice asked. The whole world saw. Shinso replied, his own voice raspy. I did not lie to you, Hitoshi Shinso, the architect said. This is the purpose I offer. Not to fight thugs in alleys, but to hold the powerful to account. To give a voice to the voiceless, to force a world that has gone deaf to listen. He extended a gloved hand. It was not a gesture of aggression, but a formal invitation. The men I disabled tonight will live. The people I rescued will be free. But the men I exposed, their lives are over. Their power is broken. Which action do you believe is the truer form of justice? Which path saves more people in the end? Shinso looked at the offered hand. The debate in his mind was over. The choice was no longer between being a hero and being a villain. It was between being a cog in a broken machine, or being a gear in a new one that might actually fix something. It was a choice between sanctioned powerlessness and unsanctioned, terrifying purpose. His whole life, he had been told his power was a shortcut, a cheat, something to be feared. The architect was the first person to see it as a solution. Slowly, deliberately, Shinso reached out and took the architect's hand. The grip was firm, steady. What do you need me to do? Shinso asked, his voice solid, his last shred of doubt falling away like dust. A hint of something that might have been satisfaction entered the architect's synthetic tone. Your voice will be our primary instrument of truth. You will extract the confessions that the world needs to hear. You will be their conscience, made manifest. You will be the orator. Hitoshi Shinso, the boy who just wanted to be a hero, nodded. That boy was gone now, replaced by something harder, something more focused. He let go of the architect's hand and stood, a new resolve settling in his eyes. He was no longer Hitoshi Shinso, the outcast of the general studies course. He was the orator of the Veritas Order. And his sermon was about to begin. The silence that followed the architect's broadcast was short-lived. It was the deep, collective intake of breath before a global scream. In the minutes, hours, and days that followed, the world did not so much as react as it did detonate. The Veritas Order's first sermon was a cultural and political fragmentation bomb, and the shrapnel hit everyone. The public's response was a chaotic maelstrom of fear and fascination. The act itself, the brutal neutralization of Ishikawa's guards, the dramatic public unmasking, was terrifying. The architect was a phantom who could bypass any security, hijack any screen, and dismantle a life with the press of a button. He was a new kind of bogeyman, one who didn't lurk in the dark but weaponized the light. But his message was a poisonously seductive tune. For every citizen who saw a dangerous vigilante, there were two who saw the ugly truth in his words. Everyone knew someone who had been failed by the system. A robbery the police were too busy to investigate. A public damage lawsuit from a hero's battle that bankrupted a small business. A loved one whose disappearance was filed away and forgotten. The architect hadn't created a new grievance. He had given a name and a face, or rather, a mask, to a resentment that had been simmering just beneath the surface of their hero-worshipping society for years. Online forums and social media became digital battlegrounds. Hashtags like Veritas Truth and Architect Did Nothing Wrong trended alongside Justice for Ishikawa and Terrorist Architect. Memes depicted the hooded figure placing a dunce cap on the heads of pro-heroes. Anonymously posted analysis videos, dissecting the Veritas broadcast, garnered millions of views. The most popular of these focused on a single, chilling detail, the brief, almost subliminal flicker of green lightning that surrounded the architect when he'd first appeared. The analysts slowed it down, enhanced it, and compared it to existing hero footage. The energy signature, the way it crackled and danced around his limbs, it was eerily, undeniably similar to that of the UA prodigy who had vanished 6 months ago. The rising star who had last been seen at the site of the Celestial Tower's catastrophe. Deku. The common room of the Heights Alliance 1A dormitory was thick with a tension that could have been cut with a knife. The morning news was on the large flat screen, but no one was really watching it. They had all seen the broadcast. They had all seen the online theories. They were a class, a family forged in the crucible of villain attacks and life-or-death battles. But now, for the first time, a fracture was running through the heart of their home. Ochako Uraraka sat curled on one of the couches, her knees drawn up to her chest, her expression a portrait of pale, stricken misery. She held a cold mug of tea in her hands, her knuckles white. She had watched the broadcast on her phone, alone in her room, and had felt a nauseating wave of cognitive dissonance. The architect's methods were horrifying. Brutal. Unforgivable. But the flicker of green. It was his green. The vibrant, hopeful green that had enveloped him when he'd saved her during the entrance exam. The color she associated with impossible strength, and an even more impossible kindness. The idea that the two could be connected was a sacrilege, a violation of a fundamental truth of her world. "It's not him," she whispered, not to anyone in particular, but to the room, to the universe. It was a prayer. "It can't be. Deku. Deku wouldn't do that. He wouldn't hurt people like that." Across from her, Tenya Ida stood rigid, his arms locked behind his back in a posture of military stillness. His glasses glinted, hiding the fury in his eyes. "Whether it is Midoriya-kun or not is secondary to the immediate issue," he stated, his voice sharp and precise, each word a hammered blow of conviction. "The Veritas Order is a lawless organization that has committed multiple felonies, including assault, property damage, illegal surveillance, and public endangerment via mass panic. They have appointed themselves judge, jury, and executioner. They are, by every legal and moral definition, villains. Any justification for their actions is an apology for anarchy." He chopped a hand through the air, his signature gesture imbued with a new, harsher intensity. "My brother dedicated his life to upholding the law." He was crippled by a man, Stain, who also believed he was justified in his actions. This architect is no different. He is merely more eloquent. To sympathize with him is to spit on the very foundation of our profession. His words hung in the air, a clear line drawn in the sand. You were with the law, or you were with the criminals. There was no middle ground. Mina Ishido, usually the vibrant heart of the class, hugged a pillow to her chest, looking lost. "But Ida-chan, that Ishikawa guy, he was a monster. And none of the heroes could stop him. The architect, he did. And he saved all those people in the container. Isn't that a good thing? A good outcome does not justify criminal means." Ida shot back, his voice rising. "That is a child's morality. We are training to be licensed professionals, not vigilantes who operate on whims." "It wasn't a whim," a quiet voice cut in. All heads turned to Shoto Todoroki. He was sitting slightly apart from the others, near a window, one hand resting on the glass, which was cool to the touch. His expression was, as always, placid, but his heterochromatic eyes were sharp with an unnerving focus. He hadn't spoken a word all morning. "It was not a whim," he repeated, his gaze distant. "The operation was planned with meticulous, frightening detail. He didn't just attack, he dismantled. The evidence, the timing, the hijacking of the broadcast, it was a strategic strike against a systemic weakness. The architect identified a target the hero's system was incapable of touching, and used that failure as a platform for his ideology." He finally looked at the others, his gaze sweeping over them. "He's angry. But it is not the explosive, chaotic anger of a villain like Shigaraki. It is the cold, focused anger of disillusionment. It's the anger of someone who believed in the system, saw it fail catastrophically, and has now decided to burn it down and build something new." He paused, and the air grew heavy. "It's an anger that I understand." The implication was clear. He was referencing his own past, his hatred for his father and the hero system that had enabled Endeavor's ambition and abuse. Todoroki had found a path to reconcile his past, to forge his own way as a hero. The architect, it seemed, had chosen a different path. A darker one. Tsuyu Ajiri placed a finger to her chin, her expression troubled. "He said his name was Architect Kero. Deku. Midoriya-chan always wanted to build things. A better world for heroes. It's a horrible thought, but the name fits his personality." This observation, so simple and yet so astute, sent a fresh wave of sickness through Uraraka. She squeezed her eyes shut. "No. It can't be." The door to the common room slammed open with a force that rattled the windows. Katsuki Bakugo stood there, his school uniform disheveled, his eyes burning with a sleep-deprived, manic energy. He was holding his phone in a white-knuckled grip, the screen showing a freeze frame of the architect's hooded form. "So you've all finally pulled your heads out of the sand," he snarled, his voice a low rasp. The usual explosive arrogance was gone, replaced by something colder, something more dangerous. You're all sitting here debating philosophy like a bunch of extras in a bad movie. He strode into the center of the room, his presence sucking all the air out. I don't give a damn about his ideology, or whether what he did was right or wrong. I care about one thing. He held up the phone. That's him. That's Deku. There was no doubt in his voice. It was a statement of absolute fact. Bakugo, you can't know that for sure, Kirishima said, standing up, trying to be the calming influence. It's just a rumor online, man. You can't let it get to you. Get to me? Bakugo laughed, a harsh, ugly sound. It's been getting to me for 6 months while you all sat around and waited for the pros to find him. I told you he wasn't dead. I told you he was on some stupid mission. He jabbed a finger at the screen. You think that green lightning is a coincidence? And the way he moves? The analysis? Who else do we know who would have a 14-point plan just to take out a few goddamn security guards? Who else would know the exact nerve to press to cripple someone without killing them? Who else would be so damn extra about it all? He stalked over to the couch and loomed over Uraraka. You round face. You saw it, didn't you? That little flicker of an air pressure wall he used to stop that glass? That was a baby version of a Delaware smash. A controlled flick. He's been practicing. He's gotten stronger. A lot stronger. Uraraka flinched, unable to meet his intense gaze. She had seen it. She had recognized it on a subconscious level and had violently repressed the thought. Bakugo was just dragging the ugly truth into the light. Tears welled in her eyes, hot and traitorous. Why? She whispered, her voice breaking. Why would he do this? Bakugo's fiery expression faltered for a fraction of a second, replaced by a flash of raw, agonizing pain. He looked away, his jaw working. Because he's a damn idiot, he said, his voice dropping. He's the same self-sacrificing nerd he's always been. He saw something at that tower collapse, that broke him. And now he's trying to save the whole damn world by himself, the wrong way, just like always. He turned, his fists clenched so tight they were trembling. Small pops and crackles of his quirk sparked at his knuckles. But he's not a villain. Not yet. He's a lost cause, and I'm the one who's going to find him and beat some sense back into his thick skull. He started for the door, his purpose absolute. And what then, Bakugo? Todoroki's calm voice cut through his rage. You will fight him? The pro-heroes, the police, they will all be hunting him now. He has declared war on the system. If you engage him, you will be fighting on their side against him. Are you prepared to do that? To treat him as the enemy? Bakugo froze at the door, his back to them. The question struck a nerve, deeper than any insult could. Fight Deku? For real? Not as a rival, not as a sparring partner, but as a hero fighting a villain? The thought was nauseating. It was a violation of the natural order of his universe. I'll do what I have to do, he growled, without turning around. He slammed the door behind him, the sound echoing the fracture that had just split their class, their house, in two. The architect watched the internal UE security feeds from his subway station command center. He had seen the entire exchange in the 1A common room, his audio sensors picking up every word. He watched Bakugo storm out, saw the tears on Uraraka's face, noted the conflict in Todoroki's eyes. He felt nothing. A faint, academic curiosity, perhaps. He catalogued their reactions as data points. Uraraka, emotional attachment, denial. Ida, rigid moral absolutism. Todoroki, empathetic pragmatism. Bakugo, possessive rage and a misguided sense of responsibility. It was all predictable. It was all irrelevant. They were part of the past. Children playing a child's game of heroes and villains, blind to the real war being waged in the shadows. He had once been one of them. The memory felt distant, like a story he'd read about someone else. He turned away from the screen, his attention shifting to the man who stood silently in the center of the platform. Hitoshi Shinso, no, the orator, was looking at the same screens, his expression unreadable. They were your friends, Shinso said. It wasn't a question. They were classmates. The architect corrected, his voice the usual dispassionate monotone. Friendship is a luxury. We have a purpose. Shinso didn't respond for a moment. He was still processing the whiplash of the last 24 hours. He had walked out of UA, in the dead of night, leaving only a simple, cryptic note on his desk. I have found a better way to make them listen. He had been brought here, to this subterranean nexus of secrets and shadows. He had seen the depth of the architect's intelligence network, the sheer scale of his ambition. It was more than he could have ever imagined. He was a collaborator now. A deserter. A villain in the eyes of the world. But standing here, in the cold, logical heart of the architect's operation, it felt less like a fall from grace and more like an ascension. Your former classmates are not our concern, the architect stated, bringing up a new set of files on the main screen. Our next phase requires a different set of tools. Raw power and analysis are not enough. We need specialists in infiltration and ideology. Shinso looked at the files. They were profiles. Detailed, exhaustive, and terrifyingly intimate. The first was a girl with blonde hair tied into two messy buns, a wide, unnerving smile plastered on her face. Name, Himiko Toga. Quirk, Transform. Affiliation, formerly of the League of Villains Paranormal Liberation Front. Status, in hiding since the PLF's recent reorganization. Disillusioned with Shigaraki's singular focus on destruction. Psychological profile, severe hematomania and sadomasochistic tendencies, stemming from quirk-based societal rejection. Actions are driven by a deeply warped and obsessive interpretation of love and connection. She seeks to literally become those she admires. Toga? Shinso said, a flicker of unease touching him. She's a murderer. A psychopath. How can she be a tool for your new order? You see a psychopath. I see a master of infiltration whose core motivation has been misunderstood and mishandled. The architect countered. He brought up another window, showing crime scene photos from Toga's attacks, juxtaposed with pages from her confiscated diary. The League offered her chaos. They allowed her to indulge her impulses without question. They treated her like a rabid dog they could point at their enemies. It was a short-sighted and wasteful application of her unique talents. He zoomed in on a passage from her diary. I just want to be the people I love. If I drink their blood and wear their face, we can be together forever. Why does everyone scream? She doesn't desire to kill. The architect explained calmly. Killing is merely the most effective method she has discovered to obtain the blood required for her quirk and to eliminate the object of her affection so she can replace them, thus fulfilling her twisted need for connection. Her villainy is the tragic byproduct of a desperate, unmet psychological need. A need we can satisfy. Satisfy? Shinso echoed, disturbed. How? By giving her a purpose that aligns with her core desire. We will not ask her to stop wanting to become others. We will direct that desire. She will become our deep cover operative. She will gather intelligence by becoming our targets. And in return, we offer her a twisted form of salvation. A place where her nature is not condemned, but utilized. A place where she can love as many people as she wants, without the mess. We will give her a new philosophy of connection, one that serves our needs. Shinso stared at the smiling face of the girl on the screen. The architect's plan was audacious, amoral, and utterly brilliant. He wasn't recruiting a killer. He was reprogramming one. The architect switched to the next file. The image was stark. A man bound in a high-security straitjacket, his face covered by a muzzle-like restraint, his eyes burning with a zealot's fire even in the grainy prison photograph. Name Kaizo Makaguro. Alias, Hero Killer, Stain. Quirk, Bloodcurdle. Status, incarcerated at Tartarus, Maximum Security Wing. Psychological profile, fanatical obsession with the concept of a true hero. Believes the current hero system is a corrupt farce and that fake heroes, those motivated by fame or fortune, must be culled to purify society. Possesses immense ideological influence within the underworld and among disillusioned youth. Stain. Shinso breathed. He was a legend. A nightmare. The man who had crippled Ida's brother. You're not thinking of breaking him out? A mass breakout is crude and chaotic. Unnecessary, the architect stated. Stain is more valuable as a symbol than as a soldier. His body is in Tartarus, But his ideology is free. It's an ideology that resonates with our own, though his methods are imprecise. He culls the symptoms. We aim to cure the disease. So what's the plan? I will not break him out. I will break in. The architect's gloved fingers danced across a keyboard, bringing up a schematic of Tartarus's labyrinthine security systems. I will speak to him. I will present the Veritas Order not as an adversary, but as the logical evolution of his crusade. He sought to prune the diseased branches. I will uproot the entire rotten tree. I will not offer him freedom. I will offer him the fulfillment of his life's work. I will make him our ideological figurehead, our prophet in chains. From his cell, he will rally the disillusioned, the outcasts, the true believers who see the rot just as we do. He will become our recruitment sergeant. Shinso looked from the file of the blood-obsessed girl to the file of the fanatical hero killer, and then to the hooded, implacable figure of the architect. He was building his house, not with bricks and mortar, but with the broken, discarded, and dangerous people of the world. He was forging them into tools, into pillars for his new order. This was no longer just about exposing corruption. This was about building an army. An army of true believers, led by a boy who was once the most fervent believer of them all. Prepare yourself, orator, the architect said, turning away from the screens and looking directly at Shinso. Your first real test is about to begin. You will be instrumental in the recruitment of Toga. You will need to make her listen. Not with your quirk, but with your words. You must learn to speak their language. Shinso nodded, a cold resolve settling deep in his bones. The house of 1A was divided, grieving for a boy they thought they knew. But here, in the darkness beneath the city, a new house was being built, and its foundation was the wreckage of a hero's broken dream.